Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. And one time, on a dare, I took a shot of movie theater popcorn butter. It was a terrible mistake. It kind of tasted like peaches. Okay, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield. The podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back, everybody. If you've been here for a while, I'm happy to see you again. If this is your first time here at the Beginner Photography Podcast, then welcome. I am super happy to have you. This week has been a major week for the podcast on so many levels. First of all, this interview, I'm looking forward to this one. I know you guys are going to get a kick out of this one. It's not my usual. It's with a photographer who has nothing to do with people. He photographs people, but what we talk about has nothing to do with people or animals or anything living for that matter. So a really fun interview that I know that you guys are going to enjoy, especially if you like to Instagram your lunches and delicious desserts and stuff. So like I said, this was a really big week for the podcast for several reasons, okay? And most notably, and I'm so excited about this. I feel so stupid for being so excited about this. I have started a brand new podcast. It's actually kind of a podcast, but it's focused on your smart speaker. So this new podcast is actually not a pod. It's a flash briefing. And if you don't know what a flash briefing is on your Amazon Echo. So if you have an Amazon Echo, you can just say, Alexa, what's my flash briefing? And I'm sorry if I just set off your Alexa right there. I did not mean to do that. But you can just say, hey, what's my flash briefing? And you can curate your own news on news sources like, whatever information you want to know about. And it will keep you up to date. Well, I have started a new venture where I thought this was just so cool, so I made one myself. So I have my own news flash briefing, and it is called BPP 365, okay? And if you want to enable it on your Amazon device, I won't say it again, but you know the name, just go to your Amazon Echo and say, Alexa, launch Beginner Photography Podcast 365. And there you go. If maybe you're in your car and that meant nothing, but if you're inside the house, then that means that Alexa will go ahead and add the new daily flash briefing, which is BPP 365. So here's a little update on what it is, a little bit of information. Okay, BPP 365 is a daily extension to this podcast. So I don't cut up clips from this podcast and put it out and like repurpose it, because you're listening to this right now. You don't need to rehear this. This is all new content, and it comes to you every single day. Monday, new content. Monday is Monday motivation. Listen, sometimes you wake up on Monday and you're just like, why am I even up? I want to go back to bed. I want to give you a reason to get up out of bed and get shooting. I have it's where I read fun, inspirational quotes and relate it to your life and photography. And last week's quote was from Helen Keller, so you might want to listen to that one and figure out how I related that to photography. Tuesday is Photo Tip Tuesday. I'm going to share little bits of information on how you can take better photos. Wednesday is What's Your Why Wednesday. I want to hear from you. This is one of my favorite things, okay? I love interacting with you, the community of the podcast. This podcast right now, if you were to just take a look at my life right now, I am in an empty room and I am speaking to a piece of glass and silicon, right? I'm all alone. This is very weird. But because I know that there's you on the other end of this and you're listening and you're enjoying this. I want to be a part of that. I want you to be a part of the community. So I want to know Wednesday, I've dedicated Wednesday to what is your why Wednesday. And like I said, this is really exciting. You can call into the show and you can tell me why what it is about photography that gets you excited, what motivates you about photography, what keeps you going, because we all hit roadblocks in photography. What is the one thing that's going to keep you going? Is it taking memories of the kids that they're going to remember forever? Is it the creative outlet that you want so much? Are you simply in it because you need to photograph products at your job? There's so many reasons to enjoy photography and be a part of the Beginner Photography Podcast community. I want to know what yours is. So here, if you're interested in that, I would love to hear from you. And here's all that you got to do. If you have an iPhone, if you have a cell phone, essentially, if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you can download an app called Anchor. And Anchor it's a podcast app, okay? But anybody can create their own podcast. And I've been playing around with it, and it's pretty cool. I mean, honestly, you can just go in there and create your own podcast of anything. It doesn't take any special equipment. But this is where I'm hosting BPP 365. So you can, once you're in Anchor, once you download Anchor, you can just search for BPP 365. Let me just make sure that actually works. Yeah, BPP 365. And then once you go there, you're going to find a little message or a little button up at the top that says send a message. This is where all you got to do is just hold the phone up to your ear and just start talking. I just want to know who you are, where you're from, and why you love photography, why you're passionate about photography. It doesn't matter what time of day. You can be morning, night. Nobody's going to hear it until I add it to the show, okay? So don't worry about time zones or anything like that. Remember, just download the Anchor app, find the show, search for it, BPP 365, and then up at the top of the page, you can send me a message. And that's it. And then I will have you on the show to share your why with thousands of people, so that maybe somebody else can share the exact same reason. And that is going to be so much fun, okay? Thursday is Photo Q&A Thursday. Again, you better download that Anchor app. This is your chance to ask me any question that you want about photography. Maybe you have a question. We just dealt with lens filters and even a little bit of insurance, which may be more than the beginner level, but there's still great information in there, right? So whatever questions you have about photography, cameras, lenses, aperture, shooting locations, whatever that is, you can ask me personally. You can hey Raymond, I got a question for you. Again, download the Anchor app, find BPP 365, shoot me a message, and send me your question. All you got to do, just let me know who you are, where you're from, and then go ahead and ask your question. That's it. Friday is really cool. It is Photo Assignment Friday. So Photo Assignment Friday, I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to get out there. I want you to do something. I want you to take action with photography. This isn't like, I want you to take a photo. It's nothing crazy. It's something that you can do, that anybody can do, any time of day, no matter where you are, okay? So these photo assignments are really fun. I want you to get out there and just try to do something creative in photography. I want to push you forward, all right? And then you're going to take those photos and then you're going to post them to Instagram to see other listeners' photos. And you're going to use the hashtag BPP365. See how I'm kind of tying all this together? And again, you can join that community and see what other people are doing. Saturday is fun. Saturday is Photo News Saturday. Listen, there's a lot of things that happen in the world of photography. I'm looking forward to this next Saturdays. It is, we're dealing with a lawsuit. I'm not dealing with a lawsuit, but there's a lawsuit that's being dealt with right now through two very famous photographers, and they share all about it. So I talk about that in the news this coming Saturday. Sunday's got to be my favorite day of the week, okay? And I hope that it's going to be yours too. And it's Photo History Sunday. I'm going to share a bit of information with you about the history of photography, because I truly believe that if you don't know where you came from, you're not going to know where you're going, right? There was a purpose. And I share interesting tidbits about photography. I don't know if you knew this, but the original purchasers of cameras, right? When the camera was first invented, people weren't like, oh, I'm going to start taking pictures of my family. The original purchasers of cameras were simply painters, because a painting took so long, either in the field of a landscape or even of a model. It took Leonardo da Vinci 4 years to paint the Mona Lisa. He had to pay a model to sit there the whole time, right? Because it's got to be like in perfect light. They got to keep coming back every single day. With a photograph, you could simply take a picture of what it is that you want to paint, and now it doesn't matter if you're outside and it starts raining or it's cloudy. You have documentation of that, and now you can paint it whenever you want to. It's really fun stuff. It's really interesting stuff that gets me excited, gets me motivated, and that is Photo History Sunday. So I'm also having a little bit of a contest, okay? Because I want to be a part of your morning. BPP 365 is only 2 to 3 minutes. And you can listen to it while, if you have an Amazon Echo in your bathroom, you can listen to it while brushing your teeth like I do. You can do it while pouring yourself a morning cup of coffee if you have one in the kitchen, making the kids lunches, whatever it is that you're doing. It's short form. It's not hours long. Like this whole rant has become like 8.5 minutes. You could listen almost to a whole week's worth of BPP 365 in the time that it's taken me to rant about this. But it's really exciting, and so I'm doing a contest because I want you to be a part of this. And if you don't have an Amazon Echo, that's okay, because I'm gonna give you one. That's right, I'm gonna give you an Amazon Echo. You can win it. So here's all that you gotta do. All that you gotta do if you're interested in winning is right now or later if you're driving, because I don't recommend that you do anything with your phone while driving. I want you to take a picture of yourself. I want you to take a selfie of yourself with your camera in hand. Okay? Introduce yourself and post it to Instagram using hashtag BPP365 by June 29th. And on June 29th, I will pick a winner, and I will shoot you a message and be like, hey, what's your address? You just won yourself an Amazon Echo. And that's it. Okay? So that you can be a part of BPP 365. Okay. I need to go back to the gym. I'm winded after that one. All right. Well, that was my spiel about BPP 365. I'm truly excited about this. And if you don't have a smart speaker, if you just don't want one or whatever, but you're still interested in learning and listening, well, it's not tough luck, because you can still listen on the Anchor app for iOS and Android, like I mentioned. But that's it. It's not going to be in iTunes. This is very exclusive. So if you want to be a part of the future, that's it. Amazon Echo. And I'm working on Google Home too. I actually like Google Home more than Amazon Echo, but actually that doesn't matter in this photography podcast. So point is, I'm working on it, and it'll be coming hopefully soon, but it doesn't seem like it's anywhere near as easy to create as the Amazon Echo. We're going to get into this podcast. I'm going to stop that. We're going to get into this podcast right now. It is with a photographer who photographs food. He photographs a lot of food, and he photographs it well. And if you look at his website, you are going to be hungry. You're going to leave very, very, very hungry. It is with photographer Rob Andrews, and he shares such great tips today. This has gone on way too long. I'm just going to let you get into it right now because I'm excited about this one. So here we go, my interview with Rob Andrews. Today's guest is a food and lifestyle photographer from San Diego. I'm excited to talk to him about the art of making food look delicious and how I can up my Instagram game. So today I'm talking to Rob Andrews. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on here and talk to me about photography and food. Like I just said, you are a food photographer. But before you started taking photos of food, can we talk about how you got your start in photography?
Sure. So actually, I always tell the story wrong. Probably I started out with a little auto film camera, and I was kind of early into digital. I had a friend who was like a Silicon Valley guy, and we were building computers really early on, and I had a really early Photoshop experience. So when digital came out, I had taken 2 trips in one summer, one to France and one to Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. In France, I had taken my little film automatic camera. It just had like 2 buttons, like advance and shoot, and but I had a blast with it. And then Costa Rica trip, I bought a digital camera. It was like a 1 megapixel Olympus camera, and the sensor blew up after one trip. But
oh, no way! Oh, geez.
But super fun. And then I kind of got my start there, and then I had a buddy who years later, I kind of let it go for a while, and then years later I had a buddy who got into photography heavy when DSLRs came out, my friend James Taylor, and he showed me a lot of stuff when I was starting out, and he made some of the mistakes that I was, I could avoid by watching him, like some of the stuff he bought, or I just kind of watched him go through the whole process, and I was always like a year behind him, so he was a great help in just getting me going. And then I just took pictures of like my wife, my daughter, all that stuff, and then I started. I was doing music, and I was doing websites on the side. Mm-hmm. And with some of my website clients, I started to shoot products for them.
Oh, okay.
And over time, I started building creative lighting and stuff like that, and just gradually decided that websites, it was horrible doing websites. I hated it. and so shooting was much more fun. So I started just gradually kind of phasing other things out of my life and start building client list with photography. So.
Okay, so that seems like a pretty seamless transition. I can totally picture that in my head. You start off making websites. They need photos. You have a camera. You just start taking those photos. So is that how it worked for food as well? Were you making websites for restaurants, or how did you make that transition into food?
No. So I'm lucky in a sense that I didn't have really any day job. So I was freelance in music, and then I was freelance in web design. Mm-hmm. And so I was working for myself, and I was doing all this basically out of my house. And so with my web clients, I started shooting a little bit for them. And then just through word of mouth, I would start shooting for other people. And even with actually one of my music gigs was at this restaurant that desperately needed decent photos. And so I kind of just volunteered some time for them. And they ended up, we made a deal. Like I was just going to shoot the job for free and get some food photos in my portfolio, and if they liked them, they'd buy them.
Oh, okay, wow.
So the time was free, but if they want, the ones they wanted, they could buy. The ones they didn't like, they didn't have to buy.
Right.
And that turned out to be a pretty good strategy. And then as my portfolio, because I had products in my portfolio just from all the web clients giving me stuff to shoot, but
right.
I didn't really have any food, so sometimes you get to do that when people take a risk on you. So that really helped, because I was able to get like at least 5 or 6 plates in my portfolio to mix in with product photography, and then start getting some word of mouth gigs.
Right. So I want you to take me back to that first time where you had a plate in front of your camera. I'm sure that if you were to go back and look at those photos, they're much different than what you would obviously create today. But showing up to that first session, was there anything going through your mind that you wanted to capture that day? Like if everything else went wrong, if you captured this one aspect, the day would have been all right.
Yeah. They had a scallop dish that was they lit it on fire.
Oh, jeez.
And I was shooting with strobes, and at that time I knew how to use strobes pretty well, but I didn't really I never really shot fire, and so it was kind of like, okay, if I could like somehow light the dish nicely and show the flames, this will be a success. If I don't, and I do it without burning myself or whatever.
That's pretty important.
That was So that shot came off, and they actually, that was one of the ones they bought.
Oh, nice.
And so that was lucky, and then. The other shot, actually, all the shots came out pretty decent. I mean, I knew what I was doing with lighting already. I just didn't know really how to style the food or anything.
Right.
But at that time, they had a great chef, and he was pretty much in charge of plating things nicely and making sure everything stayed fresh for me. And I was in really good hands, so I didn't have to worry about anything going. There's nothing there that could have gone super wrong.
Sure, and especially I'm sure that if you were under the understanding that your time would be free and they would only have to purchase whatever they wanted, that would alleviate some of that stress, I bet.
Right, and then you have time to, if something did go wrong, you have time to replate it or make another one. And it's not like they're paying you by the hour. So
sure.
Yeah. But there was nothing there that could have been too disastrous.
Good.
Sometimes you take a job that's a little bit over your head. You just don't want to go too.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I kind of want to transition a little bit. I kind of want to ask a few questions that are we're gonna go with the same theme. Okay, that's how my brain worked best when I tried to come up with a few questions. So for the rest of this podcast, I want to assume that we're going to be photographing a hamburger, because I figured that most people have access to a hamburger. Maybe they don't have access to flaming scallops. So a hamburger is something that we all have access to. If you were to photograph a hamburger, a cheeseburger, a burger today, what would be your thought process going into it?
Oh, well, so the hardest thing about burgers is the styling by far. I mean, they're not easy. So if you're going to do like your first, if you're just trying to do something for practice, it could be great, or it could be really a complete fail.
Okay. Before we get into that, just a quick, for those listening who aren't into photography, or they're going to be into photography, who aren't as well versed in the world of food photography, can you describe what styling is before we get on to the next step?
Sure. So food styling can be as simple as just arranging things on the plate in a pleasing, some sort of pleasing arrangement so that it looks good. It can also mean like using a special sort of liquid to make a turkey look brown even though it's not cooked, or something like that. Something a little more related to chemistry than actual cooking. So a skilled food stylist will know all these tricks of how to make something look awesome, and make it, more than that, make it stay awesome over the course of an hour, so you could keep shooting it and trying different things without worrying about it starting to look horrible.
Gotcha. I would imagine like ice cream would be a tough one.
Yeah, so a lot of it is related to the preservation of the food and just making it not look like, because normal food that you cook that you're going to eat, it starts to look icky really quick if you let it sit out, especially if you put lights on it and just let it sit out, right?
Sure.
So it's going to look gross. So yeah, that's kind of the role the food stylist is. Sometimes it's my role, if we don't have a food stylist, is just to arrange everything nicely and make sure things are distributed evenly and all that stuff. And sometimes it could be doing some special tricks to keep stuff looking cool.
Okay, so then back to the burger example. What you mentioned that shooting a burger might be hard for a beginner for the food styling. What specifically about the food styling would be difficult for a cheeseburger? Because if I were to see a cheeseburger, I'd be like, all right, here we go. Pull out the phone and take a shot.
Sure. So I mean, if you the best thing is to go look at reference images of good burger shots that you like, and decide from there how to achieve them. But for example, if you take a hot patty and put it on lettuce, what happens is the lettuce starts to look gross right away because it starts to kind of wilt under the hot. So usually we shoot them room temperature. And so the patty is cooked, not maybe cooked as much as you would normally cook it, and then it sits for a little while, maybe in some oil to keep it looking moist, and then it's brought in at room temp so it doesn't destroy any pickles, onions, tomato, anything else you have on the burger.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's one trick. Some people go so far as to like Scotch guard the bun so that no liquid kind of seeps in while you're getting shots. Getting the lettuce, a lot of burger joints use iceberg on the actual burgers they sell, but then when you see the pictures, it's actually like the green leaf lettuce that has a nice little waves in it.
Oh, yeah. So, that's interesting. I've never noticed that.
Yeah, ingredient selection. And then just cutting the tomatoes, if you cut them like too thick, proportionate to your, or too thin or too thick, proportionate to your patty and your burger, it looks really weird. So you would think that would be like a simple bonehead thing to cut some tomatoes, and then you put them on there and you're like, oh, it looks ridiculous. They're just like way too thick for this. So those kinds of things, cutting the right proportions of everything, sourcing the right ingredients that are going to look right, and then having a bun, turning the bun to the best possible side, the one that has the best arrangement of sesame seeds distributed on it. Stuff like that can all be kind of tricky, and then not letting it just dry out on set so it looks like you're gonna eat a pile of ashes or something. gross. Like the meat starts to look gray and dry over time. So
Right. Yeah. No, I can imagine. So all this talk is about like, how long it might take to, you don't want the burger to get moist, or you don't want the bun to get moist. You don't want the lettuce to wilt and all this stuff. How long would you say if you were contacted by a restaurant to say, hey, we got this new burger, we just want you to shoot it? How long would you say that it would take to complete the job?
it depends on their standards. So if you go, like I've done magazine, editorial burgers where it's just like, you're trying to really show the burger how it would be served in the restaurant. So you don't stress out as much over all those little things. You kind of shoot it as it is, and if the bun has some little dents or whatever, you're not going to worry about it as much. It's more just flipping through a magazine. But if it's for like an advertisement and they want everything to really look perfect because people are going to be staring at the shot for a little longer, then it may take, like if we were doing something in the studio here, we may make a stand-in burger. Figure out, like a stand-in model. It's the same concept, stand-in burger, or just we'll shoot a bun with something in it, something that looks, and then we'll stage everything, get our composition all figured out, get our lighting figured out, and then once we settle on that, then we might bring in the real burger and style that up. And so it could be upwards of like an hour and a half per shot or more. And I would say, like, if you're doing a big commercial, like if you're doing Burger King or McDonald's or something, it could be several hours on one shot. So
wow. So when you have this stand-in burger, the purpose is for composition and lighting. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. You want to make sure that when you get the real thing in there, you're kind of all settled on that stuff. So it's just like click.
Sure.
And then you're not worried about things going south as far as styling when you're figuring out lighting. So just
sense.
like you might do a headshot or anything else, you might want to shoot your assistant or something, make sure all your lighting looks good, and then when the client comes in, you don't have to, the CEO doesn't have to sit there and wait while you're fiddling with lights. It's kind of the same concept.
Well, it's
only
funny.
the CEO is a burger.
Only the CEO is a burger. I came from the film world. I went to film school. I wanted to be a cinematographer, so it's like I understand the point of a stand-in model, especially with like you want the eye sockets to be close and the skin color to be very relatively similar. And I'm just trying to picture a stand-in burger here, and it's just funny to me. It's a funny mental image, so that's great.
Right.
When you ever go to restaurants, obviously Instagram is huge, and part of the reason why it took off so quick was because people like to Instagram their food. Restaurants started plating their food much better, just in case food did get Instagrammed. When you go out to restaurants, do you Instagram your food?
Not really. No, it's kind of funny. That's kind of like something I do at work, and I don't really like if I'm not going to like set up a tripod and do it all and do all that, then I'm not going to do it, kind of a thing.
Right. I totally gotcha. I totally gotcha. On a personal note, if you were to make like Instagram stories making comments of like every dish that you were served on how like it could be either plated better or how you would photograph it, I'm just letting you know I would totally watch that. That would be like pretty awesome content. I would totally watch
I don't know the restaurant would like it, or if they would get pissed off about me critiquing.
Are you kidding? They would totally start contacting you and be like, "What? Well, you know what? We don't have a photographer, and clearly you have expertise here, so." I don't know. Just saying. I feel like that would be some interesting content, and I don't see a lot of that from the food world. Not that I guess I'm as in the world of food photography as you are, but just something to think about. I would totally watch that.
That's interesting. So,
kind of keeping on this whole burger example here, as a wedding photographer, whenever I take portraits, at a wedding, I'm trying to tell a story, or I'm trying to express an emotion through a photo. How do you incorporate that into food, which, typically the finished product doesn't have a face to be emotive? Sometimes it might, if it's a fish, I suppose. But how do you add that emotion? Or am I just totally off base with that assumption?
Mainly we're going for appetite appeal, so we're trying to bring out that one or two elements of the food that could entice you to eat it. So it could be like the syrup running down a pancake, or it could be like just the perfect juiciness of like a steak, and then some subliminal thing in the background. Like recently I did a steakhouse, and they wanted to show the fireplace in the dining room, sort of behind the steak. So you're not really thinking. It's not really a cooking thing, but it kind of gives a subliminal message that it's like flame grilling, stuff like that. It gives it that smoky grilling kind of atmosphere behind it, even though it's a fireplace in the dining area. Yeah. So you're just kind of looking for little messages that can maybe convey the deliciousness of the food and make it. If you shoot a burger on a clean white background, it has a different message than on some wooden thing with like a farmhouse barnwood in the background or something like that.
Sure. I think all that totally makes sense. I'm trying to think of like what. Have you ever been in a situation where you were asked to photograph something? Again, I'm not. It sounds like you get a lot of information from the client, either the restaurant, as they wanted this pit in the background. How much of the food photography is up to your creative design, I guess, as opposed to whatever it is that they're looking for?
Yeah. It depends on the client. So a lot of my work is editorial. So I have a magazine that will say, go to this restaurant, get the following 5 plates for the following story, and I might be able to read the story ahead of time. So that I'll know which plates I'm shooting. I'll know which ones are high priority, more or less, because it's usually like there's an entree in there somewhere. So there might be an entree and a dessert and a salad, and you kind of know which one's going to be high priority. And then usually I'll have some information about the layout. So it might be like a full page, 2-page, or a half page. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of have an idea whether to shoot horizontally or vertically.
Oh, okay.
So I have that, and then the rest is kind of up to me. So as far as moving around to different backgrounds, using different surfaces, whether I'm going to shoot aerial or angled or eye level type shots, and how I want to light it, that stuff's pretty much all up to me. But a commercial client, they're probably going to have some kind of art director who's going to tell you, we want the following feeling out of these shots. How can we achieve it? And then everything will sort of be planned out ahead of time.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. Kind of gives everybody a job and position to stick to. Okay. Gear is something that I don't really talk about a lot on this podcast, as I don't think that gear matters as much as beginners think that it does. However, in the world of food photography, I know nothing. I'm totally lost. What are some things that maybe you wish that you didn't wait so long to buy, or what is something inexpensive that can enhance the quality of food photos quick?
I'm looking around for bounce cards. I probably have some here, but bounce cards, just foam core bounce cards, are awesome. And another thing that I invested $2 in that I love so much is these silver cards you can get from Art Supply. It's like a card stock, but it's silver, like bright reflector silver on one side. But it's only 8.5 by 11, so you could just reflect like a little bit of light. Some people use little makeup mirrors that angle so they can reflect light into just a certain, those little mirrors on stands.
Sure.
But the bounce cards are huge. Obviously a good tripod head, because to make little adjustments and stuff, you don't want one that's going to droop and move around on you. So a good quality tripod head. That's kind of it. As far as lighting, I usually go pretty simple. You can use daylight from a window and some bounce cards. I use that a lot. If I only have a few plates to shoot, that's great. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, there's many different strobe setups that work on food. There's not like one way of doing it. Usually it's just like 1 or 2 lights, and there's many different ways to work depending on the dish. Sometimes I use continuous lights, sometimes I use strobes, sometimes I use speed lights, and sometimes I just use a window. So you don't have to have a ton of gear. I would recommend just practicing with light, simple stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like really everything except for the tripod there was all about lighting and being able to control your light for the food that you have. One thing that I did have a question about is that oftentimes when I see food photos, it's very large in the frame. Obviously you want that to be the hero of the photo, but I've taken exactly one food photo pretty much my entire life with a dedicated camera, and it was as a joke for my friend. It was a picture of a cupcake, and I wanted this thing to be as large in the frame as humanly possible, and I found that my minimum focus distance on my lens was too far away, so the cupcake was very small. Would you say that a macro lens would be something that a beginner should probably invest in pretty quick?
Sure, yeah, I use the 100 macro like 90 times out of 100. That's like my favorite food lens. It's long enough. I like a 100 millimeter length because it'll compress things closer together. So if you have stuff in the background that you want, you can move it around a lot and still compress things together without them being invasive to the shot. So I like that. The 24 to 70 actually, though, both the Canon and the Nikon 24 to 70s, they focus surprisingly close. So those lenses can almost, I know the Canon one I have a lot of experience with. That one focuses almost as close as some macro lenses. So that's,
no kidding.
If you're looking for a sort of Swiss Army knife for food photography, the 24-70 would be a good choice. But yeah, there's nothing quite like a macro, because if you really have something small, a little dessert thing, a cupcake's pretty small, and you want to fill the whole frame with it, definitely that's a good one to have.
Yeah, I wish that I definitely had one at that time, as it was not as impressive as I had hoped that it would be. In fact, I shared the photo in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group today, so if anybody wants to check it out, they should head there to look at it. But when I took the photo, I discovered another aspect of food photography that I was not expecting, and that was editing time. Editing time was... it took me as long to edit that one photo as it does almost an entire wedding. Just simply YouTubing, food editing. It's very intensive. What is it that? What are some common things that you do when it comes to editing photos, and how much would you say is done in camera versus editing for the final product?
Sure. So. I actually do a lot of dust cloning. That's kind of the main thing that I do first. So it's just a lot of healing brush and a lot of clone stamp to go through, because obviously when you're zoomed in on something really tight like that, you're going to have a lot of little fine details to kind of go over. And then occasionally I find myself doing things like moving a piece of basil into a different place, or like replicating something and duplicating it and moving another one in. So like... If there wasn't enough minced onions on something or whatever, and it looks weak, then I'll add some. But I try not to do too. I try to mostly take care of it in camera. I don't do a lot of like color toning or crazy stuff there, because obviously, food, it pretty much needs to have its accurate like real life colors.
Sure.
So you can't get really too crazy with that. So I mean, my average food edit for editorial is like probably 5 minutes, but my average edit for like a commercial shot that is going to have more eyeballs on it for longer periods of time, I might spend up to an hour on a photo, duplicating whatever little things in the photo, distributing things better, and then adjusting the color of color brightness of individual items on a plate.
I see. Like if a tomato wasn't red enough.
Right, something like that, where you want everything there has to look fresh and like it's the right color and obviously the right level of cookedness or whatever, if I could make up a word.
I'll allow it. That's good.
those are all things, but I don't spend a tremendous amount of time editing. It's mostly just healing and cloning and making sure things look clean.
Okay, good to know, especially after all of your years of experience, that if I were to keep up with it, my editing would probably get a little bit quicker as well. When it comes time to, like when you're just scrolling through the internet and you see photos of food, when you're going through magazines and you see photos of food, whether it be advertisements or whatever it is, what are some like telltale signs of an amateur food photographer?
I would say if it says Rob Andrew next to the photo credit, yeah. No, actually, I think most amateurs miss something in the styling or composition that's like kind of critical. Like the lighting might look awesome, and then just like you have a piece of lettuce that's just like it's just like in a weird position, or or there's like, it's let's say it's like a Waldorf salad or something, because I sent you a Waldorf salad picture.
One of my favorites.
From my vast library of Waldorf salad pictures I sent you. I had to go to the archives and pull like trays out of the, those filing cabinets that are life size, and you pull out like big slides. Waldorf room.
You should have a tumbler of just Waldorf salads.
Yeah, I have. Grace, can you pull Waldorf 751 for Mr. No, seriously. It's usually like, it's something like that. You have like a Waldorf salad, okay, and there's like walnuts on it or whatever.
Yes.
They have walnuts, right? I think that's what it is.
Walnuts are, yeah, we'll go with walnuts.
It's one of the ingredients.
Yeah.
And let's just say, and there's like one of them, and it's broken in half.
Right. Okay.
And it's like, okay, you should have had like at least 2 or 3 of those in the shot, and they should have been complete.
Sure.
So it's usually just like styling things that you see that are like slightly off, where they just didn't take the time to like arrange something or look at the little detail. It really just comes down to attention to detail. Like if you were to ask me like, or if I was to ask you like, what is like an amateur move in like a portrait or headshot, like it might be like a really cool photo, but then the guy's collar is like folded under or something. Like, oh, well, you just didn't pay attention to like the finer little details of styling it up. So kind of the same thing, just paying attention to detail and making sure all your little ducks are in a row. And part of it is that what we talked about earlier, that commitment. So like, I'm going to do 1 composition, maybe 2 on this plate, and it's just going to be awesome. I'm just focused on making 1 or 2 awesome photos. I'm not thinking about making like 60 proofs and then the client picks one. It's more like, you're going to get what you're going to get.
Yeah, I bet that makes it a whole lot easier in editing as well. That makes sense.
Yeah, and exactly. I'm not editing. I'm not like Lightrooming like, 60 bride pictures and then like 60 groom pictures. I'm like just worried about like those 2. So it's not as labor intensive as you might think.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the other thing, I guess the other one that turns me off as a food photographer looking at the photos is when people use ambient light that's not daylight. So like if there's tungsten lights overhead in the restaurant or something, and they're trying to shoot natural light with like a poor quality of light. Uh-huh. You know what I mean? Like a fluorescent or a tungsten situation that's just there, and it makes it look like they just grabbed a shot. Sure. Rather than actually doing anything. So whereas like window light looks beautiful and you can manipulate it a little bit with reflectors, or if you don't have that, then use a strobe or use some hot lights to really bring beautiful light with a nice color balance to it. Otherwise, we could totally tell. We're going to report you to the Waldorf Salad Photography Association or whatever that is.
Yeah, right.
WPP. This is WPPA or WPPI?
Yeah.
Waldorf Photographer.
Pretty much, yeah. That's it's going to be taken over. No more wedding photography. It's just Waldorf salads.
We're going to have a whole convention in Vegas just for people to photograph those.
I kind of want to take. I want one question that's not about burgers here, because this is going to be a little self-serving. If you were to show up to a wedding, or no, let's take this back. A cake shop has asked you to photograph a brand new cake of theirs, and it just so happens to be a wedding cake. Let's just say. What would you go for? What would be some main things that you would try to highlight of a wedding cake?
Well, I mean, definitely any detail in the textures, like the way that the frostings and things were laid down, any ornamentation that you would think like the cake shop would want to show off. Okay. So just really intricacies in the detail, because you can't see the inside, you can't taste the actual cake part. You never see. You just see the outside.
I do. Yeah.
So I would probably just go for like styling things, and I'd probably do some tight shots, some really tight shots on just like little details. So I'd almost treat it like a product or something, where you want to shoot like the whole shoe, but you also want to zoom in on the stitching and show like how the craftsmanship of that was done. And because that's where really the finer work they put in, the time was on those little details. And then probably just look out for like cakes are often white or some variation of white, and I'm looking for, I don't want that white to like kind of blow out or blend in or disappear, and so I'd probably like look for ways of sort of shading so I could see all the edges and contours to bring out the shape of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And you can use black cards to that effect too. We talked about bounce cards, but it's also cool to have, like, buy the foam core at Michael's that has black on white, or black on one side, white on the other. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't just make an awful sound in the mic there.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, black and white foam core is the best, because then you could use the black side to create contrast or create an edge on something where the edge is disappearing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad that I asked that question. I have a wedding this weekend, and I never would have thought of that. Black
cards are totally underused in photography, I think. I mean, everybody uses reflectors in white and silver, but sometimes taking away light is just as important as adding light. So, and to bring out edges of things.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna go to my Michael's after this interview and buy one of those. That's a great
dude. Yeah, that's gonna be a whole art project for you, man. You're gonna be like pipe cleaners and sparkles and all kinds of stuff in your back.
This is gonna be so awesome. I'm gonna show up to this wedding. They're gonna look at me like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
To anybody listening who wants to seriously try their hand at food photography, what do you recommend the first step is, or the maybe not first step, the next step is?
I guess it's make some food and practice, because there's a lot of theorizing. We can talk about, you put a softbox behind it, and then you light and then you reflect from the front, and then all the camera settings and stuff. But all that's pretty simple, and you could arguably do it 100 different ways until you really get your hands dirty and just start shooting. You'll figure out quickly what's going to work for you. So I recommend just make something simple. You can make a salad. There's 100 things. You make some pasta, 100 things you can make around the house, and just shoot them. Shoot them in window light with some bounce cards, and then see if you can kind of recreate the look with strobes, and just kind of play around. But the main thing is get your hands dirty and really try it.
Right. No, just looking at other people's Instagrams and just going from there, huh?
Just salivating, yeah.
That's about all that it's good for sure. Let me see. No, that's it. Rob, I really want to thank you for your time, obviously, for coming on and sharing everything that you did about food photography, giving us a little taste of the world of shooting food. Can you let the listeners know where they can find you online?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I have an Instagram that I maintain fairly regularly. That's at Rob Andrew Photo. I also shoot some portrait and lifestyle work, so they can go over to Rob Andrew Lifestyle to get the other types of work that I do. And then I'm same thing on Facebook and Twitter at Rob Andrew Photo. They can also go to my website, robandrewphoto.com. And I teach classes locally here in San Diego through localphotoclasses.com, so you can jump on there. And if I can plug one more shameless self-promotion, is I have a food photography tutorial on photog.com, which is if you're interested in product photography or any kind of still life photography. It's an awesome website. Alex owns that. He's a great commercial photographer, and I have a food tutorial on there. It's about $100 to buy. It's very much geared toward beginners, and so it goes through equipment. We have a whole equipment video, and then we have really basic lighting stuff. Just we do window light reflectors. You can kind of see what I'm shooting and the whole thought process of getting your first food images. So.
That sounds really important, because like you just said, you can talk about theory all you want, but it's not until you see it put into practice that for a lot of people, myself included, that it doesn't actually click until that point. So I will be sure to put links to all of that in the show notes if anybody's interested to go check that out. And you got to promise me that you're going to start going to restaurants and Instagram storying your some food styling tips, man.
That's a thought. I think that's pretty good.
Awesome.
I think that's a new idea.
All right. Well, Rob, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate everything that you shared today.
Thanks for having me.
I'll tell you what, if you follow me on Instagram, you better watch out, because my Instagram game is it's going up right now. This was a great interview. Rob, if you're listening, man, thank you so much for coming on and sharing everything that you did. It was truly a pleasure to talk with you. I know that we had some technical difficulties, but we made it work, and I truly value your time. So again, thank you so much, Rob, for coming on the podcast. For all you listeners, I really want to know what your biggest takeaway was from this one, because typically I interview people who photograph people. And this was one about food. I want to know how you're going to use Rob's information. I want to know what your biggest takeaway was and how you're going to use it to try taking photos of food. Okay? I'm not saying that listening to this podcast, you now have to become a food photographer, but I want you to try something new. Okay? Because to me, that's what gets me excited about photography, is when I'm in a situation that's new and it's not something that's just comfortable. It's something interesting, and I have to push myself creatively. Okay, that is what gets me really excited about photography. And for food, I mean, hey, I enjoy myself some good food every once in a while. Who doesn't? I'm gonna try to take some really, really good photos of food using Rob's tip. One I thought was using a black card. And if you don't know what a black card is, maybe I should have explained it in the podcast. I don't have one around me, but there's white cards and black cards. Okay, you know how they have those like big pop-up reflectors, like on eBay or Amazon or whatever. The point of that is to reflect the light. So one side is actually white, and it's not for reflection; it's for diffusion of the sun. But if you have a piece of white card and you place it in front of something, light will hit that and bounce off, and then reflect it onto whatever your subject is. If you use a piece of black card, then it doesn't reflect and it blocks some of the light, and that just adds to the contouring, like Rob said. And wow, I'm really excited to use this tip at a wedding and really get better cake photos, because you know what? People love cake. People spend a lot of money on cake at weddings, and I love looking at it. So I'm going to do my best to take the best photos of cake possible. And if that means that I'm bringing a black card with me to a wedding, then that is what I'm doing. So again, I really want to know what your biggest takeaway was. And guess what? It's super easy to do, because Rob is in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. So if you are already part of the group, guess what? You have access to Rob. You can be like, hey, Rob, I got a question for you. If you're not part of the group, you know what you got to do. All you got to do is just go to Facebook and search for Beginner Photography Podcast, and you will find the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group right there. You got to answer 3 questions. I upped this from 2 to 3 questions. I was getting some like really lazy answers from people, and I'm not looking for novels, but something more than just like, yes, to learn, you know. Yes, I'm a human. I want to learn photography. I really want to know what gets you interested about photography, because I don't think that photography is very passive. So I upped it to 3 questions. Now I want to know simply how you heard about the podcast. So that's it, guys. This was a massive week, and next week is going to be equally massive. But until then, I want you to get out. I want you to shoot. I want you to add BPP 365 to your morning routine, to your daily flash briefing. Again, all you got to say is, Alexa, launch Beginner Photography Podcast 365, and that's it. Or just, if it's in the Alexa app as well, if you use that, just go to the Amazon Alexa app and then just search for photography, and then just scroll down a little bit and you will be able to find it. And that's it. That's how you're going to learn and grow as a photographer. Hopefully get motivated, inspired, and educated. So win, 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 win. That was 4 wins. Anyway, that's it for today, guys. I want you to, like I said, get out there, keep shooting, shoot what you love, stay inspired, do something interesting. But most importantly, please be safe. All right? I love you all, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.